Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can I start by congratulating Enough Abuse on their prescience in running this conference in a week when two very different but very important child abuse stories in the media have put child sexual abuse right up at the top of the news agenda. The first is the case, as yet legally unproved, of allegations of sexual abuse of young teenage girls by Jimmy Savile. And the other is the sad case of the child abduction and presumed murder of a little 5-year-old girl in Machynlleth. I have a Welsh husband, so I can say that. So, as you will know, since Jimmy's death, a number of women have come forward and claimed that he groomed and or sexually abused them over a period of many years. Of course, it would not be appropriate for me to express any opinion about the alleged facts of this particular case, but suffice it to say that I'm very pleased that the police are going to be carrying out an investigation. Although some people feel that since the man is dead, that's a waste of time, it isn't. And then to be followed by another investigation by the BBC, where much of the abuse is alleged to have taken place, although it's also alleged to have taken place in many other places. The case, I think, raises some very, very important issues. Why did some of the girls not feel able to come forward until now? And if they did come forward, and some of them did, because we know that there were allegations in 2007, which the CPS did not pursue because they said there was insufficient evidence, why were they not believed? And why was that case not pursued? What culture was there in the workplace about this sort of behaviour? I heard one female Radio 1 presenter who has said publicly that she too was physically assaulted by male colleagues, even while she was broadcasting live, and felt too intimidated to complain. Who knew about it, and what did they do about it? And if they didn't do anything, why didn't they? Did the status and the other good work of the person concerned involve the case to be, the rumours to be suppressed? Even by some who are very famous for their concern for children. And I think you know who I mean, because she's spoken out about it. How far have we come? Is this sort of culture still rife in workplaces, or is it a thing of the past? And how can we make sure that it remains a thing of the past? Do we now believe children who make allegations? Do they have the confidence that if they do come forward, they will be believed and treated sensitively? And do they always have a trusted adult to go to? And do those trusted adults know what to do and who to go to if a child does make revelations? How are we protecting children these days from this sort of thing? Are we providing them with the knowledge and the self-confidence to protect themselves? How are we helping their parents to protect them? Do parents even know the extent of the dangers that their children face? Ladies and gentlemen, these are the issues that you will be debating today. The second case of the 5-year-old girl is very different. And here we have to assume for the moment that this little child has paid the ultimate price for the perversions of an alleged killer. Obviously, the case hasn't been heard, so we can't make any assumptions about any individual or exactly what happened. Indeed, they haven't even found a body yet. However, this case also raises questions. How can we protect children as young as 5 when they don't even know what sex is? How can we make a child appropriately cautious without undermining the trust that she ought to be able to have in most of the adults around her? Ladies and gentlemen, the common factor in both of these very different cases is the need to help children to be their own best protectors. I am not saying that as we adults should not protect them. Of course we should. But we cannot be watching over them every minute. And even we often trust people who should not be trusted. The fact that it's vital that every child should be given age-appropriate education is about what is appropriate touching and what isn't, what is appropriate conversation and what isn't, what is appropriate behaviour and what isn't. Their self-esteem and self-confidence should be built up so that they feel they can say, no, go away, or no, I won't meet you alone, I'll bring my friend, or I'll go and ask my mummy, or whatever is appropriate. This is a task not just for schools, but for parents, the police, those who work with young people, and the whole of society. I think the case in Machynlleth was, I didn't say it very well that time, Machynlleth, is interesting because quite clearly that whole society feels, at least they do now, that it is their role to protect their children. That became very, very clear from the media coverage. But I don't want us to build a society in which every child is afraid of every adult, and adults are unwilling to come forward to work with children because of the danger of being suspected of paedophilia. So we have to strike a fine balance, and it's very difficult. We have to approach children through the media and using the language which they understand and to which they will respond best. And we must never rest until every child is safe. But it is possible to speak to even young children in the language which is appropriate for them, but which they understand. Only recently I saw a little series of films produced by CBeebies about health, about having a healthy body, which is aimed at very, very young children, very effective and very appropriate. So I think we shouldn't be afraid to address these issues. But of course, we have to remember they are young children, they have innocence, which we mustn't destroy. But we have to give them that armoury that they need to protect them. Now, I think child protection really falls into three sections: prevention, action, and rehabilitation. Prevention, of course, is the most important thing. We would rather not have to take action or to provide therapeutic help to a child or even an adult who's been abused a long time ago, or therapeutic help to the perpetrators to try and make sure they never do it again and address their behaviour. So prevention is the most important of those three, but they're all, I suppose, in a way, equally important. What it means is that we have to spread information. Dissemination of information is step one. People really need to understand how harmful this is, what can be the very, very long-term effects of it, and why it is so important that we nip it in the bud before it ever starts. So I applaud your work and wish you a very useful and enjoyable conference. And sadly, as Marilyn said, I can't stay because I have to go and speak in a debate about child development in the House of Lords starting at about 11:35, and I don't yet know how many minutes I've got to speak, so I'll then have to look at the few notes that I have and decide whether I can expand a bit or whether I have to cut a bit out. So I need to do that when I get there. So I'm going to have to run and get in a taxi or on a bus before long. But I do have a little time. If anybody wants to ask any questions, I do have time for that. Yes?
Can I ask, do you think that there are many initiatives that are going on at the moment that are looking at prevention?
Oh, I think there are. There are many of them voluntary. I think many schools are actually very aware of the dangers as well and are doing a very good job in PSHE and also bringing in experts from the outside. But unfortunately, too many schools don't. It's a real postcode lottery. You know, a lot of schools just, they put it in the too difficult tray.
Do you think it should be mandatory that schools have a policy, like they have a bullying policy, for example?
They do have to have a bullying policy, that's absolutely right. Yes, I think we should be educating children for life, not just for a job. And life involves nasty things. And we have to help them to deal with them in their own way, to keep themselves safe, and if something happens, to take action very quickly.
Anyone?
Yes.
Baroness Walmsley, there is the issue of obviously teaching children about keeping themselves safe, but do you think there's enough around children's centres and Sure Start, which is about safety for children, about enabling adults as parents, as very much part of that child's life growing through, obviously, having some training and education, because it's all very centred on the children and not very much on the parents.
Yes, it is. I quite agree with you. You know, parenting, of course, I'm sure Sue Atkins would agree with this, it's the most important and most difficult and challenging job that we do, and it's not valued enough. And we wouldn't dream of doing a very difficult professional job without a lot of training, would we? And yet somehow or other we seem to think it's beneath us to have any training and coaching in how to parent. Just because you're physically capable of producing a child doesn't mean to say that you know how to address all the many challenges that will come to you over the years, and of course they never go away, of helping your child to live a happy and successful life. So I'm very much in favour of the sort of supportive, not the sort of nannying, telling you how to do it, but the let's all talk about it kind of parenting support groups. Because so many parents who've been to these, obviously facilitated by a qualified and knowledgeable person, but they tell me that they learn a lot from other parents, and that is part of the benefit, because it makes them realise they're not alone. You know, this is not their problem, just their problem. And I think if we could get to the point, if only we could fund it, where this is a universal service that people could opt into, I think that's so important, because we do not want to produce a stigma that parenting classes are only for people from deprived backgrounds, because we all know in this room that problems between parents and children and different behavioural problems and so on that are so challenging for parents to address don't just happen amongst poor people. Certainly the factors of their lives sometimes make those problems more difficult, but they can happen to anybody, and it's very important that there's no stigma attached to any of these. Now, the government under the ex-minister now, Sarah Tether, who believed very much in these things, has introduced a pilot. I don't think it's been going for very long, where the government is funding parenting classes, support groups, professionally facilitated in 3 parts of the country. I don't think the results of those pilots have been gathered yet, but I shall be asking very soon, actually, within about an hour, what are the government's plans to actually monitor and assess the success of those groups, and what's it planning to do then, you know, if they're successful or seen to be successful, valued by the parents, are we going to have some more funding put into it? Children's centres, of course, are very important in relation to all these services, and they can be a really important hub, not just in urban areas, but in particular in rural areas, for the provision of services like this. But when it comes to parents, you've got to be flexible. You've got to provide what they want, where they want it, and when they want it. And that's not easy, actually. But I do think there is a feeling within government now, there's an understanding of the importance of facilitating, not trying to do it for parents, but helping parents, enabling parents to get the best possible advice and help that they can, without being a nanny state, which none of us want to be. Okay. Thank you very much indeed.
I think that's very wise words. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you, Baroness Walmsley. It's really wise and balanced.